Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to have a chance to speak to today's emergency motion and the amendments to the motion put forward by my honourable colleague, the member for Abbotsford. As indicated in the Paris Agreement, the issue of climate change will take a joint global effort to reduce emissions going forward. The whole world needs to be involved. I'd like to repeat that, just what I stated there, Mr. Speaker, because I think it is important to remember. It will take a joint global effort to reduce emissions going forward. The whole world needs to get involved. I strongly feel that most Canadians understand this and are willing to do their part to reduce emissions where they can. In fact, Mr. Speaker, this past weekend, I had the opportunity of visiting some friends at a campsite, and a number of the young children there was talking about the issues of climate change and the issues of carbon tax. And their point was that this carbon tax that was being put on them to reduce emissions, every one of them said it's not going to do it. It's not going forward. So Canadians understand that, Mr. Speaker. At the same time, we recognize that Canada is responsible, and these young people understood that. It was just 1.6% of global greenhouse gas emissions, minuscule to other countries. And so it does truly need to be an international cooperative effort to address climate change. The Liberal motion that we are debating today will unfortunately do nothing to address climate change. There are no concrete, actionable items in this motion. It asks that we in this House recognize that climate change is real and urgent crisis. Yet it is only now, 3.5 years into their mandate, just before an election, that this issue has suddenly become urgent. We have known about climate change for decades. It is not a new concept. So why, days before the House rises for the summer, have the Liberals decided that it isn't urgent now? Furthermore, the motion fails to acknowledge the fact that Canada continues to fall short of its emissions reductions targets. Just weeks ago, the Minister of Environment appeared at the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development and was asked point blank about whether or not Canada could meet its targets as set out in the Paris Agreement. She answered, yes, we are on track. However, we know that she was not telling the truth, as figures show that Canada fell 44 megatons short of its targets in 2016, 66 megatons short in 2017, and 79 megatons short in 2018. Mr. Speaker, I cannot understand why the minister would mislead and provide misinformation to Canadians in this way. Perhaps it is embarrassing, given that this government painted themselves as champions of the environment. It seems that they are trying to save face with the motion that we are debating today. Yet anyone can see this motion will have zero impact on reducing emissions and will not get Canada any closer to meeting the targets that we agreed to under the Paris Agreement. Now, Mr. Speaker, we know that there are many great innovative ideas that are being developed every day in our great country. People all over Canada are coming up with innovative and knowledgeable ideas that utilize the natural resources that we are blessed to have here. I would like to speak about some of the efforts that are ongoing, which are actually having a measurable impact on emissions reductions and climate change in Canada. A recent report conducted by the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change outlined how crucial the removal of CO2 from the atmosphere is in reducing emissions. And one of the ways that this is done is through utilizing carbon capture and storage. Many of my colleagues have heard me speak on this incredible technology in the past. Carbon capture and storage, or CCS, is an innovative green technology that allows for the capture of waste CO2 emissions produced by industrial large emitters, including coal-fired power plants. The technology allows for underground storage of the waste CO2, which can then be utilized for things such as enhanced oil recovery. This means that the CO2 produced by a generator that has been fitted with CCS will not enter the atmosphere and will be reused in other industries or absorbed 3 kilometers below the ground. Furthermore, the waste product that is generated as a result of this generation, fly ash, is also used by other industries and can be sold for the use of cement production. In fact, the City of Vancouver is currently using this very fly ash in the construction of their sidewalks. The use of fly ash in cement further reduces the emissions, this time for the cement company that utilizes it, for which CCS does not get credit. Also worth noting is that the flume gas from coal-fired power plants is almost the exact same flume gas that comes out of cement and steel plants, among others. CCS can take that gas and remove the particles from it. This would mean that this great technology could be moved into all these other areas and do the same thing, not just in coal. By utilizing this knowledge, CCS has a wide range of applications that will only benefit the environment. Mr. Speaker, in my riding of Souris Moose Mountain, there are 3 power plants: the Boundary Dam Power Station, the Shan Power Station, and the Poplar River Power Station. They have CCS installed on Unit 3, or BD3, at the Boundary Dam Power Station. Boundary Dam was the first power station in the world to successfully utilize this technology. BD3 went online in October of 2014, becoming the world's first utility-scale, fully integrated post-combustion carbon capture facility. With CCS, BD3 now produces 115 megawatts of power, enough to power over 100,000 homes in Saskatchewan annually. It is capable of reducing the SO2 emissions from the coal process by up to 100%, and the CO2 by up to 92%. So far, the use of CCS technology on BD3 has resulted in capture of over 2.5 million tons of CO2 since its operational startup. And let's not forget the nitrous oxide and particulate matter at 99.95%, or the fact that sulfur dioxide is sold to chemical companies, or CO2 is sold to oil companies. Mr. Speaker, this is innovation. This is exactly what the Minister and Prime Minister should be championing when it comes to emissions reductions in Canada. CCS is a technology that will allow for power plants in Saskatchewan to continue operating for their functional lifespans, rather than shutting them down in 2030, with no solid alternative available for the production of electricity. This is something the Liberals should be promoting, yet the Minister has barely made mention of this world-first technology, despite the fact that the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has stated that CCS is considered essential in 3 of 4 pathways to keep global warming within 1.5 degrees Celsius. The government should be shouting this from the rooftops, but unfortunately the silence with respect to CCS has been deafening. Not only is this technology appropriate, it continues to allow for the employment of over 400 solid, good middle-class workers at the power plant and 365 at the Westmoreland Coal Company. These are skilled, trained, knowledgeable, hardworking Canadians who simply just want to continue to work. In the past, one of the issues that governments worldwide have had with CCS is the cost. It is not cheap to retrofit a power plant, but I have some good news on that front. A report released by the International CCS Knowledge Centre called the Shan CCS Feasibility Study addresses this concern. It states the retrofitting Shan with CCS would be 67% cheaper per megawatt hour compared to Boundary Dam. Again, that is 67% reduction in cost. That is huge, Mr. Speaker. And with the economies of scale, this should continue to see even further cost reductions with more. With the full-scale CCS facility at Shan, roughly 2 million megatons of CO2 could be captured every year, which is twice the capacity of Boundary Dam. Clearly, CCS technology is getting better and better as it is refined and optimized over time. And that is something the Canadian government should be supporting wholeheartedly. Furthermore, up to 1,400 or 140,000 tons of fly ash could be resold in the concrete market, which could offset emissions in concrete production. This equates to potentially net reduction of 125,000 tons of CO2 each year, resulting in a facility with net negative CO2 emissions. This means the facility can be considered carbon neutral. Mr. Speaker, this is not exactly what the Minister wants. Shan would be a power plant that is actually carbon neutral and would drastically lower emissions while allowing hundreds of hardworking Canadians to keep their jobs. Mr. Speaker, today's motion, which again has been classified by the Liberals as being urgent and an emergency, is simply ineffective. The amendments put forward by my colleague from Abbotsford have substance and call on the government to produce a real climate change plan that will enable Canada to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions according to the targets of the Paris Agreement. That is real, measurable action. And by working with our international counterparts and ensuring that we are all doing our part, we will make a difference towards emissions reductions worldwide. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.